Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar interview, or should I call it a webinar hustings, because we've got a by-election coming up in Bush Hill Park in the London Borough of Enfield on July the 1st. And we thought we would interview the candidates. And in this particular hustings, we're interviewing, or we've asked to interview people from the four main parties. And Emma Rigby is going to do the interviewing with me, and you'll see her in a minute. And she's going to help me with that, and I'm going to help her. And we've got with us today Adi Adatullah, who's the Lib Dem. We've got Peter David Follett, who is the Conservative candidate. Benjamin Maiden is the Green candidate, but unfortunately he's in hospital and so he couldn't come. He's not seriously ill, but he couldn't come. And Luke Balnave has agreed to stand in for him. And Luke has been a candidate himself, so he's well equipped to answer the questions that I'm sure we've got. The Labour Party, unfortunately, turned down being on this hustings, and that's a shame because I think digital democracy is really, really important. And I hope in the future they will take part. I'm sure they will, but it's a shame they're not today. Anyhow, let's start with the three of you, and we'll ask you questions in different orders so it's fair on all of you. But if I could start with you, first of all, Adi, could you tell us, first of all, what made you want to stand for an election?
I'm just standing to stop the kind of Conservative and Labour council fighting each other rather than fighting for the people of Enfield. To bring some common sense to the council as a whole. I live in the area. I've been living here for 15 years now in the Bush Hill Park area. So I need to kind of feel that it's time for people to start to be listened, for people within Enfield to be listened to, and for someone to represent us all in Bush Hill Park as a whole. And it's also time for some common sense and some pragmatism on how this council is being led.
Okay, Peter. Why are you standing?
Well, I'm standing because, I have been a councillor before. I've got 12 years experience as a councillor. I'm well used to representing people. In fact, one of the wards I was previously a councillor in was Southbury ward, which joins Bush Hill Park ward. In fact, people in the southern part of that ward regard themselves as living in Bush Hill Park. It's a ward I'm very familiar with because I worked with previous Bush Hill Park councillors, particularly on the Ailey Croft housing estate, which is actually divided between the two wards of Bush Hill Park and Southbury ward. I'm currently working with the two current Conservative councillors, Claire De Silva and James Hockney. James Hockney is a resident of the ward, so he's aware of the issues. I've been involved in many campaigns in the ward, not least many residents that have expressed deep concern about traffic displacement from low traffic neighbourhoods.
Okay, well, we'll ask you about that later on. So don't go into all the issues or else you.
But really, about me, I'm 43 years old. I've lived in the borough most of my life, since a small child anyway. And I'm educated in the borough. As I said before, I've served on the council for 12 years. I'm used to serving residents and people of the borough. Adi says councillors just fight with each other. That's not my experience at all. In fact, I've served in split council wards, so I'm used to working with both Labour and Conservative colleagues.
Okay, well, let's take the issues up later on and keep the answers fairly short because we've got a lot of questions. Luke, I can't ask you why you're standing because you're not, but could you tell us why Benjamin is standing?
Yeah, I feel like I can speak a little bit for Benjamin. I know him very well. He stood before. He's incredibly passionate about his local area. He wants to stand up for local residents. A bit like Adi, he's fed up of what he feels is that sort of the council not working for local people and wants to provide a sort of fresh voice on the council. He works in education, kind of very locally, and passionate about sort of young people's futures in particular. So those things coming together, he's really keen to better represent sort of local residents.
Okay, thanks very much. And as I said, Emma is doing this interview with me. So Emma, over to you.
Good evening. Hi, everyone. Look, it's great to be here this evening. I'm 100% behind Francis when he says that it's really important that these hustings happen. I'm a firm believer that local residents get to know the candidates or understand what the candidates' beliefs are. So it's great to be here this evening to do this. Right, so I just want to start, if we can start with you, Peter, on this. What do you feel are the two main issues that are prominent at the moment in Bush Hill Park for residents?
The first main issue is the low traffic neighbourhoods. Firstly, there's in the ones that have already been brought into existence, of course, displacement of traffic into the ward, and we are noticing congestion on our road network. The council is also proposing, or at least the deputy leader of the council is proposing, to introduce a low traffic neighbourhood into the Bush Hill Park roads, which will only displace traffic onto the already congested main roads within the ward, such as Church Street. The second issue is basically the council's fortnightly bin collections system, which has caused massive fly tipping within the wards. I was only there on Sunday to see an overflowing bin. And really, it's been blamed on commercial waste. It's not commercial waste. It's definitely bin bags. It's what's referred to in the council's bagging out. So really, it's weekly bin collections and low traffic neighbourhoods.
Great, thank you. And Addy, if we can move to you next, what do you think are the two main issues residents in Bush Hill Park are facing?
For me, the two main issues that I hear from people on the street is one, the crime level in the area, people who are being mugged in the local parks, phones being snatched off people, people whose cars have been nicked over the last couple of weeks. Those are things that I hear about that are issues for people, and also in terms of kind of public bins and things that are being used for private rubbish. So people are dumping their private rubbish into public bins, the one you see on the streets. So those are kind of the two main issues I've heard people talk about, on a day-to-day basis. So the crime level is going up, the rubbish or fly tipping, as some people call it, in the area, it's going up, and something needs to be done about it, and they're not being done. So those are the two things that people have spoken to me about. Great, thank you. And Luke, if you can answer on behalf of.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can say everything that Benjamin might pick out, but for me, I live quite close by. I would say one definitely is sort of the general quality of the environment, and that includes kind of litter as well as kind of air pollution and things like that. Just generally the sort of the quality of the local environment for people that they're living in. So we'd look at tackling fly tipping a lot more strongly than has been happening, and also trying to sort out more regular sort of collection and sort of waste. And the other issue, so that's sort of a general environment quality point of view. The other one is kind of nuisance, particularly in kind of Bush Hill Park, similar to what Addy was saying, actually. Not nuisance in the park, but people really enjoy that park. But unfortunately, there is a sort of side issue whereby sorry, a bit loud, whereby people, unfortunately, there's a recurrence of issues there where not necessarily sort of local residents come to use the park for different reasons, and actually, whether small but very sort of inconvenient sort of crimes are being committed that are generally sort of creating a small element of fear in what would otherwise be an amazingly enjoyable park to use, and actually it's affecting people's daily lives when they feel they can't go about their business as they would like to.
Okay. Okay, by the way, for people who come on late, Luke is standing in for Benjamin because Benjamin is ill. He's in hospital, so we're grateful for Luke for doing that. Okay, so one of the really big issues that are facing people, and none of you mentioned them in your introduction, is the incinerator in Edmonton. And there's a lot of concern about that. Now, can I ask you each, I mean, do you support the incinerator, or do you think there should be a pause so we can rethink it? Addy.
The reason I didn't mention it in my response was I knew that you were going to ask the question about it, so there wasn't any point repeating the same thing over and over again. But in terms of the incinerators, I think the answer you get from me is that we don't support it from a candidate point of view. The burning of waste, in Enfield itself won't meet our climate targets. This system makes little sense because over the next 20 or 30 or 10, 20 to 30 years, all it's going to generate is 700,000 more, carbon dioxide. So I don't see the point of, building the incinerator. We need to change. Yes, we do need to change. However, we need to kind of look at what we have at the moment, see how that goes over the next couple of years, and then at that time decide on something to implement rather than this something of this scale that they're thinking of building. And our recycling rate is also low, and it will stay that way if we're building something that needs waste, and waste in order to generate money. So that's basically my response to that.
Okay, and Luke.
Yeah, as you'd expect, sort of from the Greens, we're entirely against this and see it as they should definitely pause and review. We think the scale of it is entirely sort of unjustified in terms of meeting climate targets, but also meeting sort of health targets, the whole Skyfill issue that will be created, and trebly so if the scale of what they want to do is allowed to proceed. And we also think it's incredibly bad from a social justice point of view in terms of its location, the sort of the concentration of its plumes, where they tend to land. It can change from day to day, but it's a massive social justice as well as a sort of health justice issue, as well as not being commensurate with the sort of climate targets, which we feel because of the lifespan of this sort of scale of construction means that if this sort of instance of build is repeated over the country, we've got absolutely no chance of meeting our sort of climate objectives, and it just can't be allowed to stand.
Okay, Peter.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer this question. My opinion and the Conservative group's opinion is pause and review, which is shared by both the local MPs, Ian Duncan-Smith and Kate Bosumor, that joined the sites. The reason why is that the cost of expanding this incinerator have basically almost doubled. It was originally estimated at £650 million. It is now estimated to be £1.2 billion. And that excludes the running costs of the scheme. I mean, it locks us into a waste solution for possibly 20 to 30 years. I mean, there is an argument that burning waste actually discourages recycling, and has other two panelists have already mentioned, Enfield already has a low rate of recycling anyway. And of course, the air pollution has been mentioned too. So my argument would be, let's pause this scheme, put it back to the drawing board, and let's have a proper discussion with the communities at Enfield and, of course, neighbouring Chinkford, because it's on the back border, and see if this really is the right solution to deal with London's waste.
Okay, Emma?
Great, so straight from incinerators onto the green belt. Hot topic right now. We've seen protesters out in Enfield feeling that they haven't been listened to in regards to the green belt. I want to understand your views on the building on the green belt for more housing. So if we can start with Luke. As a sort of national policy, the Green Party is completely against the sort of invasion of
precious, green belt, green land, green field sites, and have a absolute preference on regenerating brownfield sites as an absolute priority. We know that we need more housing, we need more social housing, we need more family housing in Enfield, but this isn't the solution to that. Chances are, these sort of big developments are not going to include anywhere near sort of the quantity of affordable housing that we need. It's going to culminate in just being a sort of a developer's sort of money making scheme, which is not something that's conducive to what Enfield needs. And yeah, as a long-term resident of Enfield myself, I know that sort of as an outer London suburb, one of the sort of things that makes Enfield a really nice place to live is having that sort of variety of spaces. And I think it's incredibly precious for sort of future generations to experience that. And sort of starting to encroach on the green belt, who knows where that's going to lead to. If you start developing a little bit, for us, that's an absolute no-no.
With regards to green belt, we have enough brown belts in the area that we can build on. We've got enough brown belt that we can build up to about 36,000 homes on. Labour have abolished the local plan subcommittee that would have reviewed and consulted on this green belt plan. So they're forcing this through when they don't have the subcommittee in place anymore. The Conservatives nationally are changing the law to take away people's rights to object to building on the green belt, and locally have substantial donations from building companies that kind of influences their decisions on those. The council has also lost its democracy and scrutiny, and what we need to do is to fight and take that back so that we can have some scrutiny regarding this and consult regarding the building on green belts.
Okay, Peter.
Well, firstly, on that, national policy planning policy framework does not suggest building on the green belt, and the Conservative government is not suggesting that. In fact, building on the green belt should only happen in exceptional circumstances when all brownfield sites have been exhausted. And that's why I'm completely opposed to the Labour Council's plans to build on Enfield's green belts. They failed to develop their brownfield sites. We only have to look at Meridian Water, which has been in the planning stages for nearly 10 years now, and we're yet to see a completed dwelling on the site. In fact, they've extended the building frame time on that by 15 years, so it may not be finished until 2055. My biggest concern is that whereas in the brownfield sites, particularly Meridian Water, where a new station has been built, which has 4 platforms which can take people to their places of work, and infrastructure is in place such as schools, sewage, etc. These greenbelt sites have none of that. There's no doctors' surgeries, there's no schools there. Where are the basic utilities there? And also, where is the public transport? We want sustainable development. If these were built out, there'll be car-based suburbs. And it's even more concerning that Meridian Water, for example, has had its estimated total homes in the plan reduced by 5,000 homes. And the upper estimate, what is proposed on the Cruise Hill site, is 5,000 homes, and including a golf course. This is important amenity land. The Mayor of London's even described the green belt, no friend of the Conservatives, as London's important green lung. And once the green belt is gone, it is gone forever. So therefore, to sum up, I'm totally opposed to this, as is Enfield Conservative Party.
Okay, but clearly there is a need for housing in Enfield, and the development on the Greenbelt and the development in Meridian Water is the council's way of going around that. Do you think it's the right way? Do you think they're building what we need, and that is homes for families at an affordable price, or do you think they're not? Luke? I think there's a massive, you can't help but see the sort of friction because of they're being led, I feel, by sort of the developer side of the argument. There's going to be an obvious friction between what the developers think how they can maximize the sort of sale values of
of any sites they're offered against what families can afford and what works for families. So I think that sort of natural friction is only going to sort of play out the way this is being approached, in terms of, from what I can see, a sort of more of a developer-led consultation, rather than this public consultation that's gone out. We haven't been privy to all the discussions with the developer that have happened sort of prior to this. I think that's a bit sort of the consultation is a bit disingenuous, in terms of that this should have happened a long time ago, before they started prospecting any developer. So I think that creates a friction. Absolutely, they should focus on brownfield sites where, like Peter said, the amenities, some level of amenities already exist, and can better sort of accommodate families in terms of school places, doctor surgery, things like that. So I don't think that these are marrying well to the objectives of what we need to see in Enfield.
Okay. Peter, would you like to give us your view next?
Well, thank you, Francis. I thought it's worth noting, it's quite interesting that the Mayor of London's London plan does not actually have a commitment to family homes, unlike previous London plans did. And that's where I think the problem lies, in the planning system, and particularly Enfield Council's planning system, which doesn't seem to be challenging developers. For example, we actually are building a lot of 1 and 2 bedroom flats or apartments, whatever you prefer to call them in this borough, as opposed to 3 and 4 bedroom homes. Now, I think what could help is if the council used its planning powers properly, and when we so when a planning application becomes forward, if it's for too many low density dwellings, that actually the planners at the council push back on this and say, no, we want 3 and 4 bedroom homes. I mean, it's part of the reason why the council has failed on many planning policies anyway, because we have the second highest number of families in temporary accommodation in all of England. And part of that comes from, actually, as we go back to Meridian Water again, I mean, it's 10 years. Why hasn't anything been built there yet? I mean, it needs to happen. The infrastructure is in place. I mean, the council just needs to get on with it.
So, as I mentioned earlier, what the issues basically, as we at Liberal Democrats feel, is that the planning subcommittee no longer exists. So, planning officers, and we've been making notes about this for a while, planning officers and senior leaders at Enfield Council have repeatedly been warned about the lack of family housing, being built in housing developments in Enfield. But those warnings were either ignored or just argued against, despite clear breaches that we're not meeting our planning policies. And the housing development in Enfield are currently not taking into account the need to provide proper affordable family housing required by planning policy. And we have to prioritize the building of affordable homes and housing for people, on the residents. And the council can drive that. It's not they can't do it, but they choose not to. And so the opportunities are there, so they just need to do it. And that's what we intend to do.
Oh, right, I have to be very careful here. We are going to talk LTNs, okay, another huge topic going on at the moment across the borough. Now, what I want to know from you guys is, do you like them? Do you oppose them? Or do you like them and just think they're really badly implemented? So, Peter, if we can start with you on LTNs. Now, I know you're probably going to want to go on for a couple of hours here, everyone, but let's keep it.
Yeah.
The short answer is I'm opposed to LTNs. My reasons I'll give you is that I don't think they actually help the problem of traffic and congestion, because all it does is move traffic to what are already so-called main roads, i.e. other residential roads that have been designated main roads. So these poor residents of these roads where the traffic is displaced to suffer extra pollution from vehicles idling while stuck in traffic. They also, the other problem is the economic argument that actually, if you have vehicles stuck in traffic, tradespeople and people that need to drive and move around the borough to deliver the goods and services we need can't get to their places of business. So therefore, less economic activity happens. So therefore, and also speaking to residents on the doorstep of Bushhill Park, it's quite clear they don't want LTNs. They don't like the existing LTNs in Palmer's Green. They certainly don't want LTNs brought to Bushhill Park ward. I mean, you do have to question the motives of the council when it's actually estimated that £2 million in fines has been already raised from the existing low traffic neighbourhoods. Okay. I know Councillor Claire and James, the existing Conservative councillors, are opposed this scheme. If elected on July the 1st, I intend to join them and oppose low traffic neighbourhoods.
Okay, Addy?
I think from like Emma just said, that it's a highly divisive issue at the moment, and it's inflamed by the Labour incompetence and the Conservatives' opportunism. So neither side will discuss LTNs, and Peter just said that he does kind of support it in a way, but this is not what we're hearing from the council as a whole. So, but measures such as LTNs can work if done properly, but they have to work and show to work. And in trying to do so, LTNs need to be properly measured. The key performance indicators have to show that it works, and proper arrangements and engagements with residents. So if the residents decide that they don't want it, then don't install it, but you need to engage with residents when you're trying to, implement something like that. So neither of the two Enfield main parties want to do that. Rather than a war on pollution, they want to warn each other, which is why we think, we need to consult the people of Enfield about this and need to give them the help and support they need.
Okay, and Luke?
So absolutely appreciate the divisive issue in terms of how they've materialised, and I don't think that is the sort of level of divisiveness has been helped by actually sort of what I see as kind of electioneering and sort of opportunism by predominantly sort of Conservative councillors in terms of fanning the flames of that sort of division, rather than looking for sort of solutions and actually looking to sort of review what's been done and how can it be bettered, how can it be improved, and actually go about sort of asking residents for their views in a sort of independent way, rather than just fanning the flames that potentially do exist. So as a Green Party, we're sort of entirely behind encouraging active travel. LTNs form part of that in terms of wanting, where there are residential sort of areas that work, wanting low traffic going through those residential areas for the benefit of residents and young residents living there, for their own health benefits, and helping them choose healthy local travel habits. So as a premise, we're absolutely behind them. They could have, obviously, how they've been implemented hasn't been optimal at all. How they've been consulted on hasn't been optimal, and that's the area that we would look to greatly improve upon. Okay. Like Addy, so last thing, like Addy, we'd like to see sort of measurement of outcomes, and changes made on the back of that. Would also, sorry, very last point, in terms of the areas that they're deployed in, we think that it could have been done better in terms of prioritising not the most affluent areas, and making sure, obviously, the spillover into sort of nearby areas is minimised.
Okay, well, let's go on to the next question, because that, as Emma said, that's a really hot topic and we could have gone on all night. The other really big emergency that's facing us and will to the end of this century, and it's a very serious one, and that is climate change. Now, Enfield has got a climate change plan or policy, but do you think Enfield really understands what an emergency is? Addy?
No, I don't think they do. I think what we've seen from the Enfield Council is that they've made a lot of right noises about climate change and seems to have no clue about what it's doing. And what we're looking at, or what we're proposing, that the whole economy will have to change, but the council is just making things worse. So I'm here to show that there is a viable alternative to Labour doing the wrong thing and the Conservatives doing nothing. What we're proposing is basically some kind of consultation or engagement with local experts, such as NCAP, where possible, to talk about what we really need on climate change and consult with them on that particular subject. And whatever it is we come out with together with the local community support, then we can implement those instead. Because what we're hearing is a lot of talk and nothing happening at all. So let's engage with people that know this stuff. They know this stuff about the environment and climate change, and involve them in some kind of consultation. And whatever the outcome of that consultation is something that we can decide on moving forward on.
The short answer is, I don't think they've done enough. They've declared this climate emergency, but what actions have been put in place? For example, in Bushell Park Ward, there isn't a pollution monitor within the boundaries of the ward. Some roads, there has actually been a reduction in trees in the last 10 years, not an increase as you'd expect if there was a climate emergency. And where are alternatives to encourage green travel, such as electric car charging points? I don't really see any, certainly not in Bushell Park Ward. And actually, strangely enough, the council has actually made it harder to recycle in this borough because your recycling is now collected once every fortnight. Well, that means, I mean, I'm in a two-person household and we fill up our recycling bin. So larger households, I dread to think they must definitely be struggling. And equally, I mean, they're charging £60 to collect compostable garden waste. Well, if you don't want people to dispose of their garden waste in the black bin, which end up going in the incinerator, I think that charge needs to be removed, which is actually Conservative Party policy within Enfield.
So as we all know, there's been a huge amount of criticism of Enfield Council that it does not fully engage inclusively with Enfield communities. So I'd like to know your views on that and what your feelings are on that. And Luke, did you get that question?
I did roughly the end of it. I can guess what the beginning was.
So it's
Sorry.
just the criticism around Enfield Council and how they don't fully engage with communities. So I'd like your answers on that.
Yeah, I think, you know, unfortunately, I absolutely agree in terms of, you know, we've seen too many examples now where, you know, consultation hasn't happened, or, you know, actually material consultation in terms of taking on board all the sort of responses and things like that in a very sort of clear and transparent way. And so, yeah, I think, you know, that's been kind of, that's only sort of harmed the impact of sort of the reputation of the council, and has created a kind of division between sort of council and residents, which is not what you want in terms of going forwards, because then kind of residents feel like their voice aren't being heard and they stop sort of putting that input into the council, and that's when it kind of can only go downhill in terms of the number of voices, you know, contributing, because not everyone knows the answers. You know, a lot of residents have great ideas, and we need those voices to carry on projecting those ideas, because I believe Enfield's only as strong as sort of all its residents, not just a sort of small select few on the council. And sort of just to add on the sort of climate question, absolutely not, in terms of, you know, that unfortunately the sort of climate emergency declaration has provided almost like, you know, a scapegoat. Oh, we've done that, you know, we don't need to do anything else, kind of thing. And it's created a sort of vacuum of action across the country, actually, which couldn't have been foreseen. But, you know, it's, you know, it's almost like, oh, we've declared an emergency, that, you know, we're done. So that was, sorry, just to add on the other question.
Okay, yeah, fine. And Peter, what's your view on the community engagement?
Well, my opinion of like the current Labour administration, it seems to be you can have any option as long as it's the council's preferred option. I mean, we've spoken about I mean, for example, I was walking around the ward and there's a new bus stop build out was proposed in Furs Lane. Now, the residents suggested a area by the wetlands where it wouldn't actually be next to a road junction. The council decided it was going to be by the road junction, which wasn't good for road safety, and have done it anyway. They're building it now. A bigger example was the removal of weekly bin collections. There was a big consultation there. Most residents in this borough responded to were overwhelmingly opposed to this. They did it anyway. Residents warned that this would cause fly tipping. The council ignored this. Well, it's happened, hasn't it? So really, and it's not the way I like to do business. I mean, I've been a councillor before. I mean, my biggest point is that when I was a councillor, I would make a point on a weekly basis of knocking on residents' doors and actually asking them what their concerns and issues were, and then taking it forward and raising it with council officers. I also did surveys of residents' opinions and try and get a consensus that really the council needs to get back to basics and learn to just consult with people, ask them their opinions. People are reasonable, but they want to be listened to. And this council just doesn't seem to want to do so.
Okay, and Addy.
I can actually, I agree with some of the things that both of what Peter and Pluck said about the consultation within the council, and that's basically what's happening. That we're not, the council people are not being listened to in Bushhill Park and in Enfield as a whole. So, I mean, yes, there are, you can have as much consultation you want, but if you're not really implementing what people need in the area, then it's not going to, you're not really doing what they need. So this needs to change. And I can only say that when I do get when I do win the elections, I intend to make sure that this is, I truly represent what people are talking about. Make sure that the feedback in terms of consultations are delivered to the council, and people, what people want are kind of implemented one way or the other. So I think it's quite key to kind of do that. And I understand that the consultations are not happening, so it needs to happen more, and that's what people are asking for. And examples have been given, and Peter and Lucas said things that I would say normally, but we just need to make sure that we do changes come about because of what people have asked for.
Okay, well, we're coming close to the end. So the final question to all of you, and that is, there's been a lot of criticism of the way the council's run, the way it behaves. There's a lot of bickering, there's a lot of, or a lack of civility, and councillors very often are whipped into voting the way that they should and not being true to themselves, not saying what they really believe. Can I ask each of you very, very briefly to say, would you, if you were elected, say what you believe, be true to yourself, stand up for your beliefs, and not always follow the party line? Peter.
Well, I don't know how other parties do things, but the Conservative group on Enfield Council, of which I was a member of for some years, always before any meeting would have a group meeting. We would discuss the reports and the issues and form a consensus before voting. There was no someone on high just telling us how to vote. I mean, the simple answer is that as a councillor for Bushhill Park, I would be there to represent Bushhill Park in the council, not be the council's representative in Bushhill Park. So therefore, particularly if it was something that adversely affected my constituents, even if like my group supported a particular proposal, I would speak against it and I'd happily vote against it.
Okay, that's interesting. And Addy, what about you?
What we've all been saying is that there hasn't been any shift between those two big political parties in Enfield Council. So basically, from our point of view, the Liberal Democrats part of point of view is that we believe in inclusive politics that puts residents first. So and that is what we plan to do, to implement in Enfield if I get elected on the 1st of July, is to make those things happen. I'm not going to be whipped into doing what the National Party wants or what majority of the people in the council want. I want to do what the people of Enfield or Bushhill Park have asked us to do via any consultation or in any way or form they've asked us to do it. And that's what I intend to do.
Okay, thanks. And Luke, you're not going to be elected because you're standing in for Benjamin because he's ill, he's in hospital.
Yeah.
But if Benjamin was elected, would he be his own man, or would he just follow the Green Party?
Knowing Benjamin personally, I know he speaks his own voice at all time, you know, his own thoughts. He's his own man. And just if you look at sort of Green politicians, whether it's Caroline Lucas, you know, Sean Berry, Caroline Russell, you look at representatives of the Green Party in government, you know that they're speaking their own, you know, they're using their own voice, an incredibly powerful voice wherever they are. And actually also, I recently joined Charith Gunawadina for Southgate Ward in Enfield, is his own man, speaks his own voice. I know Benjamin would be the same.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I mean, that was really interesting. And I think, Emma, we got some really honest answers there, didn't we?
Absolutely. A massive thank you to you all for coming on this evening. As I said, it's really important that candidates know who they're voting for, they get an idea about how you feel and what your views are on Enfield. So massive thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think it's great, and I think this form of digital democracy is important. You've got your views over. I hope all parties will join in the future, because I think it is the way we have to go, that people can hear their views, not just in the ward, but outside as well, because you're going to be making decisions for the whole of Enfield. So thank you all for joining us, and it's been great having you here. And thanks, Emma, for joining in again and, taking part. So we'll end this part of the interview now.